Hey, what is up guys, Merganman4 here, and with Doctor Who's 60th anniversary just around the corner, I thought now would be the perfect time to celebrate some of the best this franchise has to offer. This week, I'll be taking a look at the enigma that is the 7th Doctor. At times, a lighthearted clown who plays the spoons and loves a good mixed metaphor. At others, a master manipulator orchestrating the downfall of gods. It's an era with a wide variety of content and quality, but when it's good, it's really good. So, let's take a look at my top 10 7th Doctor stories. Number 10. Unit Dominion.
Hello, you! Meet you from eons along your timeline.
Ah, the giddy joy.
He looks younger than you.
Yes, thank you, Rain.
I can't remember if you're tactile, but I am, so I win. Give us a hug, old timer, or young timer, depending on your POV.
Oh, good grief.
Oh,
2 doctors. How very peculiar.
Kicking off this list is a 4-hour epic that spans dimensions and has alien invasions galore. This is a story that really doesn't hold back. But despite being a constant presence throughout the story, Sylvester McCoy's 7th Doctor isn't really the star of the show. That honor belongs to Alex McQueen, playing none other than a mysterious, previously unseen future incarnation of the Doctor, who not only takes the lead for most of the plot, but instantly captures you with a magnetic performance that's both utterly charming and eerily cold. That's not to say our Doctor doesn't have his moments, especially as the story approaches its climax, but it's always incredibly exciting to have a new take on a character we're all familiar with, especially in as unconventional a manner as this. It was also a great move to pair him up with one of the 7th Doctor's audio companions, Elizabeth Klein, one of the most fascinating characters Big Finish has ever created in my opinion. To sum up some important background, Klein was actually a Nazi in an alternative timeline, who ended up traveling with the Doctor as he attempted to rehabilitate her. Eventually, that version of her was overwritten with an equally strong-willed, but less bent on domination, Klein, who now works with UNIT to help save the world. Dominion deals with the aftermath of this. While she doesn't remember the aborted Nazi timeline, there's still a danger that it might reassert itself, which leads to a fascinating dynamic between Klein and the Doctor, both working for the same purpose, but fundamentally distrusting each other. Klein, because she knows there's something awful the Doctor won't tell her, and the Doctor because, well, no one likes a Nazi. Pairing her up with a future incarnation, one so far along he doesn't even remember the details, offers a similarly shaky but slightly different dynamic. And it's interesting that, in this particular case, the Doctor doesn't even trust himself. In fact, despite being known for his manipulative nature, it's the future Doctor that's doing most of the manipulating, working in the shadows and taking unpredictable actions. But maybe that's because it's not the full story. Because in the final quarter, Dominion has one more twist up its sleeve, and that's that Alex McQueen isn't playing the Doctor. Hello, Master. It's an absolutely brilliant reveal, and suddenly everything clicks into place. It's a fantastic way to introduce a new incarnation of the Doctor's best enemy, and McQueen is just as magnetic as the Master as he was as the Doctor, continuing to totally steal the show. Full of energy and clearly having a blast, but also utterly ruthless and without remorse. And the final showdown between him and the Doctor is superb. Dominion has a lot going for it. A fantastically unique Doctor-companion dynamic, a massively epic scale, twists galore, and an amazing new take on one of the Doctor's greatest foes. It's a totally engrossing 4 hours. Number 9. Ghostlight.
That's your surprise, isn't it? Bringing me back here.
Remind me what it was that you sensed when you entered this deserted house. An aura of intense evil?
Don't you have things you hate?
I can't stand burnt toast. I loathe bus stations, terrible places, full of lost luggage and lost souls.
I told you I never wanted to come back here again.
And then there's unrequited love, and tyranny, and cruelty.
Too right.
We all have a universe of our own terrors to face.
Ghostlight has a reputation for being one of the franchise's most complex and confusing stories. I'm not sure it's a reputation I entirely agree with, but even if we take it as read, I do think that it's well crafted enough that it honestly doesn't really matter. In fact, at times, I think it might actually work to the story's benefit, adding a layer of unease to proceedings which complements the creepy atmosphere well. There's a good contrast within the guest cast, each of them offering something different and bringing Gabriel Chase to life in a number of amusing, ethereal, and unpredictable ways. It's a fantastic group of characters that's highly entertaining to watch and ensures that there's never a dull moment. There's some interesting commentary on evolution and change as well, and Light's goal of stopping it so he can successfully catalog all life on Earth makes for a unique antagonist. It's a nice change in motivation from many of the other godlike beings we encounter in the series, even if the threat itself is broadly the same. To top it off, it's a very strong story for Ace, as we delve into some of her past trauma and we see the Seventh Doctor's manipulative nature beginning to put a strain on their relationship. It's really effective character work, setting up the remainder of the season quite nicely, and cementing this as one of the most complex and interesting Doctor-companion dynamics we've ever had. And despite the spooky overtones, Ghostlight has its fair share of humor as well. In fact, the dialogue in general sparkles, filled with highly memorable moments and one-liners. Scary, smart, and hugely entertaining. Number 8, Master.
Well, I was helping a young lady give birth. She pushed forth that new life into our world, and I held him in my arms. A beautiful baby boy. And as I held him, I had this image, this thought, that I could smash him to the floor. I could throw him with all my force and watch his helpless little body fall apart as it hit the ground, the blood splashing across the sterile white tiles. I could take his life as easily as I had helped bring him into the world.
In contrast to the previous Master story on this list, Master is much smaller scale, largely focusing on a select group of characters in a single location, though it shares the former's approach of having the Master take on a different identity for the majority of the runtime. This time, though, it isn't a disguise. Having lost his memory, John Smith, as he's now known, has spent the last 10 years serving the colony of Perfugium as none other than a doctor. Despite his physical disfigurement, he's a genuinely charming and kind man, completely different from the Master we're familiar with. And Geoffrey Beevers puts in a superbly contemplative performance, with chilling flashes of his true identity. There's a scene where he describes how, as a doctor, he's brought life into this world, but sometimes he thinks of how easily he could take that same life in a brutal, cruel fashion. And Beevers plays it so calmly. It's utterly terrifying, and really, that's what Master's all about. What even the most unassuming of people can be capable of. Everyone in this story has secrets, committed wrongs, regardless of the image they present. And while some are remorseful, others revel in it. The guest cast are magnificent, and you get a real sense of the history between the characters. The friendship and love, but also the envy and resentment that's built up over time, perhaps echoing the Master's relationship with the Doctor. Speaking of, Sylvester McCoy rises to the occasion and matches Beevers' performance beat for beat, with an understated approach that really complements the haunted house atmosphere that runs throughout the story. And the heartbreak as the Doctor confronts his old friend, getting a glimpse at what might have been, but knowing the monster that lies within, is superbly handled. Master is an electric character piece that really takes the time to explore these two old Time Lords in a way no other story has, offering new insight into their rivalry and their friendship in equal measure. Magnificent stuff. Number 7, The Settling.
None of this has been my fault. You brought this on yourselves.
You don't really believe that?
It's a fact. All this plotting and ploying and begging more time. If they just submitted to the authority of Parliament...
You're not here for Parliament, Oliver. They sent you away to get rid of you.
Watch that mouth. There's no need for that, Roberts.
You're a tyrant, plain and simple. Someone disagrees with you and you butcher them.
History is fascinating, but man is it also depressing. The Settling is the last pure historical I'll be talking about in this series, and it's a brutal, bloody slice of history that makes things all too real. Something new companion Hex quickly learns. It's a seminal story for him, thrown not just into the midst of a historical atrocity, but brought face to face with its perpetrator, Oliver Cromwell. I'm not sure any other companion has had such a harsh introduction to history, and indeed he very nearly gives up TARDIS travel entirely after the fact. I think part of what makes this such a compelling approach isn't just the brutality of it all, which is certainly a factor, but also the relationship Hex builds with Cromwell, forming almost a friendship of sorts as he tries to convince him there's a better, more peaceful way. Sadly, history has other plans, and Cromwell goes ahead with the slaughter. The story does a great job exploring how this affects Hex. It's one thing to hear about the death and destruction from afar, but to witness it firsthand is another thing altogether. And the story makes use of a clever framing device with him and Ace talking through events after the fact, with Ace acting as a mentor of sorts for him to confide in. It's really strong stuff. But I also have to mention the Doctor's part of the story. Having been separated from Ace and Hex, the Doctor spends much of the story alongside a pregnant woman who's lost her husband to the battle. While we see the wider events with Hex, With the Doctor, we get to focus in on the plight of an individual, and the Doctor is put in a unique position where he ends up having to deliver a baby as battle and bloodshed breaks out all around him. It's a simple but remarkably effective pairing, and Sylvester McCoy is simply fantastic as the Doctor provides an anchor for this woman who's just lost everything. It's everything the Doctor stands for, and a beautifully bittersweet storyline to wrap up an immensely powerful and unforgettable trip into history. Number 6. The Harvest.
We're all done here, aren't we? Something on your mind, Cyber Leader?
I am experiencing pain. Pain and fear. You must help me.
Oh, really?
I am dying.
Ah, yes. The flesh is weak, isn't it?
The Doctor and Ace are investigating strange goings-on at St. Gart's Hospital, where they encounter one of the Doctor's greatest foes and pick up a new friend. The friend in question is Hex, a nurse working at St. Gart's who gets caught up in their investigation. And it's a fantastic first impression. Philip Olivier puts in a highly engaging and relatable performance, ranging from friendly to awkward to a wonderfully baffled introduction to the TARDIS and the world the Doctor inhabits. He brings a great new energy to the team of the 7th Doctor and Ace, and it's interesting that he meets the Doctor through Ace, rather than the other way around. In some ways, he's more Ace's companion than the Doctor's. Together, they work to uncover the horror at the heart of St. Gart's, and discover none other than the Cybermen. And the Harvest puts them to good use, keeping their role fairly minimal, but taking an interesting route in the form of C Program, a covert operation whereby the Cybermen have offered their advanced technology and knowledge in exchange for human parts. So far, so Cybermen. Except this time around, they aren't converting the parts into Cybermen, they're using the parts to convert Cybermen into humans. It's a fantastic reversal of what we've come to expect from the Silver Giants. And while they're not exactly doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, it is, of course, part of a wider plan to ultimately convert humanity. It's a unique approach that shines a new light on a monster that all too often feels misused. A great outing for the Cybermen and a fantastic companion introduction make The Harvest a big success. Number 5, the greatest show in the galaxy.
I had expected to see what the opposition was up to before I put myself forward for the talent contest.
But no doubt you'd like to get yourself prepared first.
Oh, well, yes,
Well, let me show you and your charming assistant to your dressing room.
Oh, thank you very much. Ace!
Where did you find that earring?
Are you a robot too?
No.
Pity.
So tell me where you found it.
The circus is such a great fit for a Doctor Who story, and it's honestly surprising that such a setting hasn't been utilized more. The contrast between fun and creepy is one of the things Doctor Who does best, and the greatest show in the galaxy is no exception. There are a lot of ridiculous and cheesy moments, who can forget that rap, but they're balanced out by some genuinely chilling ones, and I quite like the idea of visitors being forced to present their own acts in the ring, entertain or die. And the revelation that the Psychic Circus started out as a genuinely happy and joyful place, and has now descended into one of death and despair, is a very effective one, and the conflict between the different members of the circus, some having embraced the new status quo, others determined to escape it at any cost, makes for some very compelling drama. Indeed, interesting as the core concept is, it's the characters that truly bring the story to life. Ian Reddington's performance as the chief clown is a particular highlight, but also the self-interested and cunning Captain Cook, the sympathetic werewolf Megs, the enigmatic Deadbeat, even the incredibly cheesy Ringmaster. Some have more depth than others, but what they all have in common is they're extremely enjoyable to watch and stick in the mind well after the story's conclusion. It's a great mystery, a fun threat, and finds the perfect balance between silly and scary. And while it may not be the greatest show in the galaxy, it's certainly up there. Number 4, A Death in the Family.
I'm gonna kill everything. Everything that crawls, grows, wiggles, and swims in all of reality. Bang! The whole lot. Finished, kaput, finito, completo. Gone! How's that for a plan?
Nobody has that sort of power.
Evelyn!
I can't believe you said that!
Wordlord, please, don't do this.
Pay attention, Doctor. For my next trick, I'm gonna wipe out every single matter creature that ever lived.
A Death in the Family is a big story, effectively acting as a finale to much of the 6th and 7th Doctor's Big Finish adventures up to this point, and the stakes are high, universe-ending in fact. And I think a big reason this works so well is the simplicity of the threat. It isn't some big alien invasion or a havoc-wreaking event, fun as those can be. It's just a single being who doesn't actually have any power until it's given to them by others. This is Nobody No One, returning from a previous 7th Doctor audio, and he is genuinely one of the most fantastically creative and utterly terrifying foes in the entire franchise. Nobody No One is a being from another universe that derives his power from words, which means if someone says, nobody can do this, or no one knows that, then nobody can do this, and no one does know that. It means he can very quickly gain a foothold by even a minor slip of the tongue. Combine that with a magnificently demented performance from Ian Reddington, taking the character's malice and insanity and running with it, and you have an all-time great villain. On top of that, A Death in the Family does some fantastic character work for both Hex and returning 6th Doctor companion Evelyn. While this isn't the end of Hex's journeys in the TARDIS, his story certainly hit its climax in his previous appearance, where he discovered the truth about his mother's death and the Doctor's involvement in it. This story serves as an epilogue to that, as Hex learns to face this newfound truth and reconcile with the Doctor and Ace, in large part due to meeting Evelyn, who was there with the Doctor when it happened. And oh, is it bittersweet to have Evelyn back here. Of course, Maggie Stables puts in another wonderful performance, and true to form, bravely faces down Nobody No One, helping the Doctor defeat him, but sacrificing her life in the process. It's a fantastic end for a fantastic companion. And honestly, I'm only really scratching the surface here. There's an abundance of fantastic ideas I haven't even touched on, including the appearance of an older 7th Doctor, nobody actually succeeding in killing the Doctor, Ace's bittersweet story as she continues to become more manipulative and Doctor-like, and one of the Doctor's most complex and risky plans to date. And somehow, it not only all works, it excels. One of the best finales Doctor Who has ever done. I think nobody would agree. Number 3. Protect and Survive.
Ace, into the shelter, both of you. The light.
Don't look at it. Hex!
I can see the bones in my hand. Like an X-ray?
There are few things more terrifying in our world than the prospect of a nuclear war. So it's somewhat surprising that Doctor Who hasn't done more with the concept. But honestly, it'd be hard to top Protect and Survive, which throws Ace and Hex, with the Doctor nowhere to be seen, into an alternative timeline where the Cold War turned hot. The first episode envelops you in a creeping sense of dread, as Ace and Hex encounter an elderly couple and discover they're preparing a fallout shelter for nuclear war. And then the bomb drops. It's an utterly terrifying experience, largely down to the fact that this story isn't pulling any punches. There is no last-minute rescue or plot armor that protects our heroes. Ace and Hex discover exactly what it means to survive the initial nuclear blast, and it's not pretty. There's a moment seared into my mind when the bomb first goes off and Hex can't look away out of shock, and is able to see right through to his skeleton. And after being dragged into the fallout shelter before the blast hits, he discovers he's gone blind. Worse, the shelter is far from ideal, and they all become infected with radiation poisoning before, eventually, one by one, they all die. It's genuinely so much scarier than any alien invasion, and there's a real weight to events as we experience them up close and personal alongside Ace and Hex. But this isn't the end for them, as there's one more cruel twist at play. They're trapped in a time loop, forced to relive the blast again and again, and it's all the Doctor's doing. It turns out the elderly couple are in fact malevolent beings of immense power, and the Doctor has set them a challenge. If they can learn what it means to be human, they can go free. What the Doctor didn't account for is that they would eventually learn how to influence their prison, even if they couldn't escape it, and they discovered a way to trap Ace and Hex within the loop in their place. Ultimately though, they complete the Doctor's challenge upon being given a choice. One of them can go free if the other remains forever, and both Ace and Hex offer to sacrifice themselves rather than leave their friend to a living hell. And as a result, they discover the answer. Selflessness, compassion, love, and they both go free. Utterly chilling, but ultimately a story of hope and friendship, Protect and Survive is nothing short of fantastic Doctor Who. Number 2, Live 34.
People were used as fuel, burned, every single one of them, just so you could have toast for breakfast.
They were worthless anyway.
Worthless? They were living, breathing, feeling people, not fuel. For months you have filled this colony with rumors of monsters creeping through the shadows, but the only monster in this colony is you. You and your government are an abhorrence. You sicken me.
Now this is how you take advantage of the audio format. Live 34 is a story of corruption, deceit, and political intrigue told entirely through the lens of a news program. It's a fantastically fitting storytelling device for this kind of story, and really sucks you into the world of Colony 34 and the plight of its citizens. At times, you almost forget you're listening to a fiction. The usage of the leads, the 7th Doctor, Ace, and Hex, is incredibly sparing, which means when they do show up, the impact is that much more powerful. And it's a vastly different experience to most stories, in that we're effectively viewing them through the perspective of the bad guys. We know they're the heroes, but they're painted as terrorists and usurpers of order, with the lens we view the story through getting more and more distorted as the government tightens its grip on the broadcasts. It makes the struggle feel that much more real, and the relief is palpable when the Doctor is finally able to overcome these hurdles and reveal the conspiracy in full, with an awe-inspiring performance from Sylvester McCoy. This story does such a good job at building up a narrative as you wait in anticipation for how it's all going to be torn down, and the truth doesn't disappoint, with an incredibly dark twist that the colony, low on resources, has begun using its own people as fuel. Live 34 is a political thriller of the highest order, fantastically paced and cleverly told to ensure you feel like you're right there in the thick of things. It's certainly one of the most unique and compelling experiences I've ever had with Doctor Who. One that left me going wow when the broadcast ended and the static rolled. And before we reach my number 1 7th Doctor story, let's take a quick look at some honorable mentions which very nearly made the cut. Theater of War. All-Consuming Fire. Muse of Fire. The Two Masters. Survival. Number 1, The Curse of Fenric.
The Wolves of Fenric. All pawns in my game. And now you.
Me? You can't! How?
The baby. In 30 years, the baby will be grown. She will have a daughter. That daughter will be you. You've just created your own future.
The Curse of Fenric is a distillation of everything that makes Doctor Who great. Scary monsters, superb character work, the consequences of time travel, it's all here, and each is executed to perfection. Let's start with the monsters. The Hemivores make for a chilling threat, both in design and the way they're shot, with director Nicholas Mallet milking every ounce of horror out of them. Fenric himself makes for an equally scary threat, but for very different reasons. Rather than being physically terrifying, it's due to his intellect and sheer power, proving to be one of the most formidable foes the Doctor's faced. No mean feat. This is emphasized by the revelation that Fenric has been manipulating events for some time, in particular being responsible for bringing the Doctor and Ace together in the first place, and manipulates Ace into creating her own future, unknowingly having met and saved her own mother as a child in this very story. But what really makes this story is the Doctor, and Ace's relationship with him. This is the story all about faith. Captain Soren's faith in the Soviet Union, Reverend Wainwright's failing faith in God, and Ace's faith in the Doctor. And in one of the most heartbreaking scenes in all of Doctor Who, the Doctor tears down their friendship and shatters their faith in him in order to defeat Fenric. It's a betrayal unlike any other in the show, and your heart not only aches for Ace, but also for the Doctor, as it becomes clear it was all a lie and he was merely doing what was necessary for the greater good. Rarely has a Doctor and companion's relationship been challenged like this, and it elevates an already excellent dynamic into one of the most complex and fascinating relationships the franchise has ever explored, and really brings into question how far is too far. Not to mention the host of excellent supporting characters, each fleshed out in great depth and brought alive by superb performances. Soren, Wainwright, Judson, Millington, Dudman. It's extremely rare to have a guest cast this good. And to top it all off, Mark Airy's haunting, dramatic score is one of the best in the show's history, perfectly fitting the vibe of the story and sticking in the head long after the credits roll. This is a story that's held in very high regard, and it's easy to see why. genuinely superb in every aspect. But what do you think? Were there any surprise inclusions? Did I leave out your top choice? Let me know what your favorite 7th Doctor stories are down in the comments below. And with that, Merganman4 over and out, and I'll see you all next week with my top 10 8th Doctor stories.